So buy now, pay later is huge. You've probably already used it. 1 in 3 people in the UK have made a purchase using buy now, pay later, or BNPL as it's sometimes referred to. And this is largely from the likes of Klarna and Clearpay and Laybuy, but also now more and more the big banks are getting involved. We've already seen things this year from the likes of Monzo, Natwest, Barclays. They're all getting in on it as well. And I'm sure many more will be doing it because this is going to continue growing. It's predicted that by the end of 2022, that 25% of transactions on retailers that accept buy now, pay later will be via that method. That is absolutely massive. So I kind of want to take you through exactly what it is because you might have been using it but not fully understanding it, or you might have been kind of hearing lots of horror stories and thinking I'm staying well clear. I'm going to take you through how it works and some of those reasons why people do use buy now, pay later and help you realize, is it okay or not okay to use it? Now, first of all, very quickly, what is it? What is buy now, pay later? Because this idea of 0% finance is nothing new, right? We've been doing this for years, for decades. Things like getting your car or your kitchen or your holiday on a delayed payment you pay in a year's time, or you have monthly installments over a year, often at 0%. That's been going on for a long time. Maybe you've had a 0% purchase credit card or a catalogue credit. Again, buying these things at 0% and then sort of like over time paying it back. Nothing new about that. The difference about when we say buy now, pay later is we're often referring to services, credit services, where you are doing it in a very short space of time. Normally the options are, and it does vary from provider to provider, but broadly the options often tend to be don't pay anything now on day one, but you pay it all back in 30 days. Or it could be that you pay for a portion of it now and split the rest out over a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it might be. And maybe there are weekly installments, monthly installments, whatever it might be. Again, they do vary. And fundamentally, these buy now, pay later services, well, they're largely going to be free as well. So there's no charge for you doing this. So it is quick access to credit. And don't be mistaken, this is credit. This is borrowing. A lot of time people don't realize it is, but it absolutely is. So should you be using this as a way to pay? There are lots of reasons why people do approach it. I want to take you through these big arguments one by one and give you my thoughts on whether that's a justified reason to use it. I think one of the big things that people like about it is that whole concept of spreading out the cost or delaying the payment. Now, that can be really handy. If something comes along, an emergency comes up, or something really expensive comes along, and we talked about the traditional 0% financing things on holidays or phones or whatever it might be, that idea that you can't pay all of it right now, it's a large amount of money right now, but you could, in a couple of months, your salary comes in, you can afford it over that time. Or the emergency comes along, you don't have the cash right now, but next month the money's there, or in 2 months the money's there to clear it all out. And if it's fee-free, that means you're not having to use an expensive credit card or your overdraft or something like that. So from that point of view, you can absolutely see why you might want to use buy now, pay later from time to time. The problem is, that's not what most people are using buy now, pay later for. They're using it largely just for general spending. Although it started off being around clothes and fashion, it has spread to literally everything. So I saw the other day that I could, if I wanted to, I could have bought a beer, a £2 beer, and spread that out over 3 months. I've seen it on like online sweet shops in the past. Really ridiculous things that you would not need to spread the cost out of this. It's not an essential. It's not an emergency. It's just an everyday expense. And actually the figures show, and this is something from Barclays and Step Changes, some analysis, that on average, people who use buy now, pay later have 4.8 different items going at any one time with an average cost of 250 quid. So they are committing to 250 quid every single month for things that they had last month or the month before. And sometimes these things will be getting a bit confusing because you might have bought one 2 months ago, then one a month later, then one last week, but it's all in this bundle. This money's all coming out, maybe in different pots from different providers. That can be very confusing, so you could lose track. But it also means you could completely overextend yourself. So it might be fine now. Yeah, I can do that. I can do 250 quid a month on these 4.8 things that I need to buy or want to buy. But what if something else crops up? All of a sudden that 250 quid might not be something you can afford. And that kind of sense that when you bought it, I can afford this, I can do it. That may have changed later on, okay? Another thing that people often talk about buy now, pay later on is it's free. It is a free way to borrow. So as long as you do clear your payments on time, there are absolutely no interest charges that are going to come along. And that might seem like a really weird business model, right? How on earth is this service free? Well, that's because the the buy now, pay later providers, they are making money from the merchants, from the retailers you're buying at. Because it has been shown that when you use buy now, pay later, when you delay your repayment or split it out, you spend more money. It could be a few things. It may be that you think, right, okay, this was £100, but actually over 3 months, it's only £33. I can afford £33. You don't necessarily think about, can you afford £100? You think, I can afford £33. So you spend more than you can. Or it might be, and we'll come back to this in a second, that you order lots of things with the intention of returning them, but because it's buy now, pay later, you don't have to shell out for it now. You're adding a couple of extra styles, a couple of extra sizes, whatever it might be, get them all delivered. Maybe you decide to keep them at the end because you like them so much. So again, you spend more money. So that is why it is free, and it is free. What they often don't tell you, and this can be quite hidden sometimes in the terms and conditions and not necessarily there right up front, they might be late payments. So again, if we talk about if you've overextended yourself, your situation has changed and you can't afford those repayments every single month, some of them will hit you with a late charge if you don't pay, okay? And that could end up being quite expensive. There might be caps from some of them, so it might not be necessarily going to pay the same amount again, but it does vary from provider to provider and it can be expensive. Again, so really, really careful. It's not necessarily going to be free. And if you do miss those payments again, even if there isn't a late fee, you might eventually be referred to a debt collector. A debt collector might then refer you on to the county court for a judgment there. If they decide against you, that will go on your credit report and that will make it very, very difficult for you to get any kind of lending in the future. Definitely will restrict your choices and your ability to get some of those best deals. And that would end up being very, very expensive. So yes, if you do make the payments on time, either at the end of the first month or whatever those staggered payments are, it is going to be free, okay? But just bear in mind that if you miss them, it could potentially get expensive down the line. The next reason people talk about buy now, pay later, I think is often that it is an easy way to borrow. So there are limited affordability checks sometimes. There is often just a soft credit check, just to check you are who you say you are. So if you can't get credit elsewhere, if you're young or have had a bad credit history and you do need to borrow money for whatever reason, again, we talked before about having there be an emergency or something expensive that you can afford but you want to spread the cost out, then this might be your shortcut, your way to get hold of that money. But that's all well and good, again, if you can afford it. If you've already got a lot of debts and those debts are potentially unmanageable or on the verge of getting unmanageable, and the reason you need that buy now, pay later is because you can't afford to buy things outright, you're just going to get yourself in a worse situation. So Citizens Advice, they found that of buy now, pay later users who had missed or made a late payment with that buy now, pay later service, more than half had been refused a credit card or another buy now, pay later service elsewhere. So for a lot of people who might be seeing this as an escape, actually it's going to make things worse. And rather than go to this easy credit, you need to sort of deal with those problems. If you aren't already, try and get free independent advice to sort out those debts. Places like Step Change or National Debt Line, you should not pay for this. Be wary of anyone who wants to charge you for help with your debts, but go there rather than get this free credit. And also, now that buy now, pay later is starting to be referred and reported to your credit reports, the credit reference agencies, if you do miss a payment, that's going to make your credit rating even worse. So something to be aware of there. Sometimes people, this next one here, sometimes people use buy now, pay later just because it's quick and it's easy. Often it's the default option on some websites. You go in, pay, it says Klarna, bang, that's how you pay. If you want something else, you've got to click a few buttons to get through to the more traditional option where you enter in your card number, or maybe you're using Apple Pay or Google Pay or PayPal or something like that. It's hardly a chore though. Do you know what I mean? It's not that difficult. So say, I usually use it because it's easy, because I click a few buttons. Well, take 30 seconds and do something else. I don't think this is a good reason to use buy now, pay later, just because it is quick to pay. Now this next one is something that I actually do think buy now, pay later can be quite useful for, long as you do follow the rules. This is around, well, I mentioned it before, where you buy more than you need with the intention of returning the things that aren't quite right. So different styles, different sizes, really particularly works here, I think, for clothes and for footwear, but it can work for anything really where you want to see it in situ in your house and just check it is the right thing for you. And as long as you do then return those items, you should hopefully end up not paying for them at all. Now, this can be a little bit risky though, because let's say you do that, delay it for 30 days. You order all these clothes, they arrive, let's say it takes them a week to get to you, hopefully sooner, but let's say a week. Maybe you're a bit busy at work, you haven't got time to try them all on, so you wait until the weekend, 3 or 4 days later, then you try them all on. And then you work out, okay, yeah, do you know what? I'm going to keep just this 1 or 2 items. I'm going to send the other dozen back, whatever it is. And you do that. Post office is closed though, so you have to wait until you get a chance to go. Maybe in the middle of the week, maybe the next weekend. Eventually you send them back and they go back. They take a week to get back. Then the retailer, well, they're not necessarily going to process it immediately. It might take a bit more time. So yes, in theory, this works, but in practice, you might still end up paying it and waiting for the refund to come through. But if you're pretty sharp on it, if you get the stuff within a few days, you try it on and you get a courier to send it back within a day, it could well be that is all processed and you do not get charged for anything you don't actually keep. So that is definitely one to consider, but be aware of those risks that might come with it. And then the last thing, which is, I think this is going to explode. I think this is going to be a big growth area with buy now, pay later. This is around rewards, offers and money back. I've already seen a few times just very recently to pay by buy now, pay later option, I could get money off or I could get free delivery. I've seen some of the newer ones offering cashback on your purchase. This is via a card, but I wouldn't be surprised if more places start offering you cashback if you use their buy now, pay later service. A new one coming later on this year from Virgin, that's going to give you fee-free spending abroad. Now, these are things you can get elsewhere. So we're not going to be a case of, yes, use these things because they're available. I would still shop around and make sure I'm getting the best possible deal out there. But I will absolutely be paying more attention to these things as they kind of expand, if they expand, and letting you know if they are the best ways to pay, if they're going to be decent ones to save you money, particularly when it comes to cashback cards. So a few pros and cons there, some reasons you might want to do it and some reasons why you might want to avoid it. My main concern is absolutely how easy it is for you to stack up a number of different buy now, pay later purchases all at once, only looking at those individual amounts rather than the total costs. And all of a sudden they stack up and you end up with, let's go back to that example, that 250 quid that on average we have over 4.8 purchases at any month. That is a lot of money for us to be having, particularly right now, cost of living crisis getting worse and worse. These are not the kind of extra payments we want to be sort of faced with if something goes wrong. So if you're at the checkout and you're thinking about buying something on buy now, pay later, this is what I would do. This is the kind of the thought process you need to go through first of all, decide whether actually you should be using it. And the first one is, do you need to? Full stop, right? Have you got the money in your current account, in your savings account, whatever it might be, that you can use instead? Because if you have, and as long as you can afford it, that money isn't already allocated to an essential bill that's coming out or another cost that you know is coming up in a while. If you've got that money and you want the thing you've got and you need the thing that's coming on, it's a good price, then just buy it. Don't delay that repayment, okay? Buy it outright. Makes much more sense. If you can't afford it right now, the money isn't there, it's not available. Well, then think about, like, do you need it right now? Can it wait 3 months? Can you go back to that classic sort of building block of money management of just saving up for something? It makes so much more sense to do that. If you save up for it, you can afford it. If anything comes along later on before you bought it, you've got that time to change your mind. Use that money you've saved for that emergency that's popped along rather than having to go, oh no, I've already committed to this money over here and now this has come along. Okay, so ideally save up for it. Now there will be some things, we talked about those expensive things which you can't afford, and that's fine. Okay, but is buy now pay later the best option for it? If something is really expensive, splitting it out over 1, 2 or 3 months, is that really going to make much of a difference? Maybe there's a better way for you to get that at 0%. Talk to the top about 0% finance on things. You can get them for iPhones and you can get them for all sorts of bits and pieces, holidays, right? A 0% purchase credit card. Again, a 0% overdraft. They might be better ways for you to spread out the cost of something that's really expensive and give you much more time to deal with it. So those monthly repayments are much smaller and make less of an impact than splitting $1,000 out over 2 or 3 months. So again, it might not be the best thing. It might be all right for you, but it might not be the best thing. Of course, that's not always going to be possible. Talked before about the kind of potentially if you've got low credit rating and you're unable to get some of those other options, then maybe, and this is an emergency comes along and you need to get something right now, just make sure that you understand the consequences. You understand what happens if you do miss a payment. What could happen with late fees? What could impact that could have on your credit report? And those monthly repayments, can you afford them? Are they actually going to be manageable? Again, sort of thing that when you're at the checkout and clicking these buttons and see that little amount, it's easy to miss. But again, I really would focus on here, just using it. If you can't afford it and you can't save up for it, only using it for emergency transactions, not just everyday stuff at all. Of course, if you manage everything perfectly well, If you're confident with those things, you know the money is there, then you might want to consider it for those other kind of positives I mentioned, ordering more than you possibly need with the intention of returning it. Just make sure you return the things you don't need. Don't get caught out by that. And also the idea of getting those rewards, getting those discounts, getting those vouchers. In a way, they're no different to a cashback credit card. From that point of view, as long as you're managing it well, manage it properly, then maybe you can be quids in. But again, just to make sure that there isn't a better deal available elsewhere. I'd love to know what your thoughts and experiences are of buy now, pay later. Do you use it? Have you used it? Is it good? Is it bad? Let me know in the comments below. My name is Andy Webb. Thank you so much for watching. Check out these videos here to help you get the most from your money.